Hey folks, welcome back to the Cotswold Collectibles YouTube channel. I'm Greg Brown, president of Cotswold Collectibles. This week we're going to continue on the series of knockoff figures and accessories, actually in particular G.I. Joe knockoff figures and accessories. Last week we talked about figures, so this week we're going to be talking about the carded sets that went on with those figures. So I'll let Dave take it from here.
Okay, so what I've got here is I've got a collection of various different carded knockoff 12-inch G.I. Joe accessories.
Right.
And I think as we mentioned in the last one, I mean, every collection that you pretty much buy is going to have some of these accessories in them. And I mean, not everyone, but almost, I would say like 98% of all collections have something knockoff in them. And what happens is we see these things, we're like, wow, where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
And what was this in? And I thought that might be vintage, but is it or not? And that's what's so great about these carded sets, is you can find these carded sets and see actually how the products were placed on. One thing that's so funny, I mean, you look at this and you want to talk about a copy of a G.I. Joe card. I mean, that's the exact same
window box
kind of thing. And they put a nice little, Iwo Jima shot on the back. They've got a little artwork on it, but they did everything from completely copying it to selling these bags of figures or accessories that I'm telling you, they sold a boatload of these bags, and there's a multitude of them, and they all have slightly different things in them, but they also kind of have the same stuff in them, which is kind of funny. But you will find those kind of things everywhere. You'll notice that there's different brands. This is not a complete list of all the brands. There are a lot of different brands. It's like much like the figures, they kind of come out of the woodwork and they just keep showing up. And but what's kind of fun about these things is you could typically usually buy them at a show, and they're not very expensive. They tend to run obviously less than $20, $30 in that kind of range. Sometimes you can get them for $5, $10 depending on what they are. But it's always interesting to me just to see what came in the box and kind of up to a certain extent of how ridiculous some of it is. And so what I think we're going to do now is we're going to put out some of my mini card collections, and we'll look at those, and then we'll just kind of talk about the individual cards in each one. Okay, so what we have here is a Totsy toy, My Buddy Combat Man, and this is one of the larger collections of various accessory sets that I have. And what's so fascinating to me is how they're all so different. They're not exactly the same. They look the same, but you want to talk about a hodgepodge. We talk a lot about in the G.I. Joe world is like what came on the card and quality control, and was stuff replaced or swapped out at some point. Well, you want to talk about just throwing out product to get product out here. I think the knockoffs are kind of a shining example of that. And I say that because you've got multitudes of these small cards that have almost the same stuff in it, but they're all slightly different. And they're all things like the difference between these two cards is one's got the hat, one has the belt, one has the sheath, but then, there's a bayonet in this one and a knife in this one, but the sheath's in this one. It doesn't really make sense. So it's kind of funny how those two things are in there. Now, again, you're gonna notice the quality of the stuff isn't exactly the same. I mean, here, and just look at this set right here. They're identical, but they're not identical because they have different shapes of packaging, and they also have different shades of color of the pants. This is a lighter green and this is more of a brown. Now, what was that supposed to go with? I don't know, but it all sounds interesting and it's cool. And these hats, they would say either nothing on the inside or made in Hong Kong. I guarantee you they will not say Hasbro in them. And that's one thing too. Like, you talk about this is a pretty common item, this ammo belt here. But if you pull that ammo belt out, I'd almost guarantee you on the back, it would say stamped Hong Kong and not the unmarked ones like the Hasbro ones are. That's, classic kind of marked and unmarked. But again, I mean, here's a lighter green uniform. I actually have, I think there's two different kinds of the pants version. This one has the boots with it. This one has the hat and the shovel. And there's something really strange in this box that we can't quite figure out what it is. Here's another pant version, but there's this golden bullet or screwdriver, missing the screwdriver, or put in there what you want it to be in your dreams. I'm not sure exactly what that accessory is. And I think it's really kind of interesting about these sets is if you look at them, they're Tootsie toys and they've got like this cover, but then look at the backs. This has got other fashionable boy dolls. Now that must be kind of Ken stuff, but then this one has all the girl stuff in it. And you know, this is kind of fun. They have like a negligee house coat, baby doll pajamas. I don't think Joe wants to wear that, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind if his date did. But anyway, I think it's interesting how they put out all this different kind of stuff on the different packaging and all that. And this was the Tootsie Manufacturing Company made out of Holyoke, Massachusetts. So these are all really cool and really fun. I will say what's interesting is you'll notice that some of these backs, they have different things on it. This one, for some reason, has gotten marked out why it's not good for G.I. Joe. But if you look at the front, it still is good for 12-inch fighting men. This has got the fashion stuff on the back. Everyone's just kind of slightly different. And that's kind of the excitement of knockoffs. As you notice, there isn't something really consistent. I mean, even these three sets right here, I know it sounds crazy. They're all duffel bags, but one has the mess kit and the hat, one has the mess kit and the canteen, one has the boots. They're all different. They're all unique. You know, but on the backs, they all have just kind of the plain stuff. Now, this one just says My Buddy with a different sticker on it. Again, I can't ever quite figure out the rhyme or the reason behind it, but it's awful interesting to a guy who's a collector that wants something different. I mean, here they also did camos. If you look at that camo outfit, I mean, I'm sure you've seen that in a collection or something along that. Now, there's no tag in that, but that camo is a dead ringer for the Hasbro camo. Unlike the figures on the bodies that we were seeing where it was that kind of cheaper, thinner, lighter green camo, this is a dead ringer for the G.I. Joe stuff. So is it the exact same material? Possibly. Is there a tag in it? No. Is it as well made? Well, it's pretty close, but I guarantee you we're going to have round snaps in there too. This pair of pants has pockets on it. I mean, we all know that not every Hasbro camouflage pants has pockets on it. Notice the round snaps. They don't have square snaps. And also notice that this hat has a staple mark in it. Sometimes you're going to find that hat with a staple still in it or a staple mark. And now you know, this is what's great about the package stuff is you realize why some of this weird stuff you have in your cases is the way that it is. And that's the part of the fun of it. You know, that's part of exciting. They did make backpacks. They made cloth backpacks. Those hand grenades, they look to me, if I look at them just off looking at them, they look just like Hasbro hand grenades. And for all we know, they were made at the factory or right next door. I don't know. I mean, we could do a whole video on hand grenades, on the differences of hand grenades and all that stuff, because there sure are a lot of variations in hand grenades. But again, it's got some, you know, doll fashions on the back if you want to get into that. What I find interesting is they also made some kind of action pilot-y type stuff, similar to what the G.I. Joe stuff is. That uniform is a dead ringer for the Scramble Pilot uniform. These brown, tall, brown, shiny boots, I know specifically we talked about them in the boot video. They're marked Hong Kong on the side. We've seen these in collections, and this is just proof that it's an actual knockoff. I think this is really quite fascinating here. We have the raft with no markings on it, but with the oar holes for it. And I think that's really interesting. There is a rope that's kind of tied to it. And there's also this really lame first aid box, which is just a plastic box that has a Red Cross sticker on it. Really cheap, really, kind of poor quality, but still it's kind of neat in the way it is. This right here, we've got two versions of like the sailor outfit. We've got a shirt and a pants. It would come in just like the shirt, and then the pants and the boots would come like that way. And then we've got it in a complete outfit. And this one comes with a 45 holster and the great knockoff sailor hat, which we're going to talk about sailor hats in the in the accessories. There's also a white bag in there too. You know, one thing that's kind of interesting about this, I was thinking about this this bag right here. This duffel bag is a green duffel bag. It's obviously cheaper, but it's stamped on it USA. And the G.I. Joe stuff doesn't have that on there, which I think is kind of interesting. And I think this one here is actually a duplicate of this. And so, I mean, here's another shining example of like, okay, why do you want to have different ones? Well, okay, look at this. We've got two essentially the same shirts in the same package, right? They got different stuff on the back. They got different stuff on the sides. You know, it's so their packaging isn't really consistent. So if you want to get into knockoff variations, I mean, you want to talk about a collecting thing that's out there that's just got all kinds of options. And will you ever have it all? No, but you might as well at least try. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. We're going to try Action Buddy. All right, so this is Action Buddy. And you know, one thing I don't really totally understand about this whole thing is one of the brands that I occasionally see out there is Leslo. And you'll see that actually stamped on some of the items. And they typically are pretty good quality. I've seen them on 30 calibers. I've seen them a lot on snowshoes. I think Action Buddy has something to do with Leslo. And the only reason why I say that is that I've got this card right here and it's got the 30 caliber with the Leslo mark on it. And so I don't know if they bought the stuff from Leslo or they put it in there, but this is actually one of the few things I've actually seen with Leslo packaged stuff on it. So I don't really know what's going on. But this is just another brand of various G.I. Joe stuff. Again, you look at those hand grenades and the quality of those hand grenades are pretty good, but then you look at the sandbags and they're tiny. They're about half the size as a G.I. Joe one. The ammo box has a sticker on it. The 30 caliber looks similar, but it's a little bit smaller. The helmet's a soft plastic and the shovel's a soft plastic too that, you know, you couldn't, you know, one thing you can say about some of the knockoff stuff, which I think is actually kind of funny, is it actually held up better for play value than the Hasbro stuff did. Because, I mean, you take a hard plastic shovel and the first thing a kid's going to want to do is go shovel dirt with it, and it's probably going to break. Whereas that soft plastic, at least it won't break. It'll give you the image that you're at least having some kind of fun there with it. You know, here's another Army set. That's your green MP that a lot of people get all excited about. You'll notice that there's like a little cloth green beret in there. I'm sure that these have round snaps. I've seen so many of these uniforms out loose. You can even tell that this one over here has got a round snap. The belt, well, the ammo belt looks pretty much like G.I. Joe. It's kind of a cheap, basically kind of a sewn on this piece of plastic. And then the rifles, you know, one thing about the knockoffs, I'll say one thing about the knockoffs, the guns are usually pretty good. I mean, they're not the same as Hasbro. You can tell we'll talk a lot about this when we look at the accessories, the paint quality. I mean, that paint job is terrible on that rifle. It's overpainted, overdone. It's like the molds didn't really work and they just shot that stuff out to get it out as quick as possible. And I mean, I understand it. They're just trying to make a buck. And you know, speaking of making a buck, you know, we talk about prices, and I think a typical small accessory card for G.I. Joe, you know, your small cards, I think those were kind of in the $1.50 range. And this thing right here is marked 79 cents. So you could get a larger card with maybe more stuff in it for 79 cents. And so the parents are just like thinking, oh, look at the value. I can get all this stuff for $1, even though it doesn't fit G.I. Joe. But it's, you know, it kind of does. The uniform doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as tailored and all that stuff, but it'll work. You might rip the boots out after about 5 minutes. Anyway, I think there's some real interesting accessories in this. This is one card that I find interesting because I found this overcoat in lots of boxes before and never knew where it came from. This bayonet, you know, someday we'll do a whole video on bayonets, but this one's marked Hong Kong, and just like everything knockoff, it's marked Hong Kong. This rifle has a way better paint job than the other one. You know, I guess it was right after lunch. They'd had a few cocktails for lunch over the last one, but you know, they're working pretty good. This must be the 9 a.m. version. I think this one's got the carbine on there, and it's got a little tent. I think what's really funny is if you look at the tent poles, they're just like little bamboo sticks, and they're not, the tent poles or the tent pegs are not, measured or, shaven down or anything. They just cut down the little sticks and say, go for it. And there's a little blanket that I've seen in quite a few collections over the years. Here's their ski patrol guy. I like this set. It's funny. You've run across it, but it's got some kind of cool things in it. It's actually got a little insignia in there that I've never seen on a loose one. That thing probably falls off in the package on most of them. But take a look at those amber goggles that are so often talked about as Desert Patrol Jeep, but those are knockoff. They actually say Hong Kong on it. I can see it from here. And the skis, I mean, those skis and poles, they're just cheap, and everybody's probably seen those at some time in a vintage collection. Here's the Air Force dress. The funny thing about the Air Force dress is this Air Force dress hat actually doesn't shrink where the G.I. Joe one actually shrinks. So a lot of people use these knockoff Air Force dress hats for their actually vintage guy because they actually look a little better because they didn't shrink like the vintage G.I. Joe ones. But again, a really low quality uniform. You can tell the round snaps that are already corroding. It's never been out of the package. Here's their Tan MP. I don't think this one's worth $1,500, but it's only because it doesn't have the black radio with it. I'm just kidding there, but this is their Tan MP. It's got the MP stripe on it. I think that is either stapled or sewn together as a loop. It doesn't even have an attachment. This is this white belt that we often see. It's in several different collections, but just to prove this is not the Winter Rescue belt. This is something totally different. And then here's a 45. And when we talk about close-ups of some of these accessories, you'll notice that almost all of these 45s have Hong Kong marked on them. The billy clubs, the main way to kind of tell the difference in the billy clubs is really the lanyard. A lot of times they look almost identical. I mean, sometimes you can tell it by feeling it. I know it's going to sound crazy, but if I take a billy club and kind of rattle it between my teeth, I can tell if it's the hard plastic or if it's a soft plastic, and it's kind of a funny thing to do. But anyway, this is all Action Buddy, and I think these are all great, and I'm going to switch over to the Adventurer next. Okay, this is the Adventurer, and it's kind of interesting about this is they've got different artwork on the back that kind of shows the figures. But what's really kind of funny to me is look at this ski outfit. We've got the goggles, the boots, the white, and you know what? Looky here. That's the same thing. So again, I don't know, man. Was it all the same factory and they're just putting different packaging on it? That's very, very, very possible. And I think at the end of the day, they're just trying to move as much product as possible. So I think there was repackaging. I think there was just, here's a bunch of, there's the low-end G.I. Joe stuff. But there's a couple things in these sets that I think are kind of interesting. We've talked about this one. Look at that. First of all, notice the packaging. They just sealed the package over the actual stuff. So if you rip that while you're pulling it apart, sorry. But there's a couple pieces in here that look really G.I. Joey. The vest, we've seen that vest a million times. If it says Air Vest USAF, or if it just says Air Vest, it's a knockoff. But if it says G.I. Joe, it's G.I. Joe. Now, is it basically the same thing? Yes. Look at that clipboard. That clipboard is a beautiful, vintage-looking clipboard. But I'll tell you what, and we'll see one in the parts, when you flip that thing over, it's going to say Made in Hong Kong. Whereas the vintage G.I. Joe one has no markings, just to add confusion. I think this one's kind of interesting too. It's got the padded vest, which is not very padded, and the G.I. Joe one is extremely padded. It's also got the signal flags, which you can just tell are just far more inexpensively done. And the flare gun, which I guarantee you is marked Hong Kong on there at some point. But these are the Adventurer. They got great little tips on it on the back on how to do these things. Of course, they're not recommended for any children under 5 years of age. And they're good for your G.I. Joe Adventurer, your Sarge. And I'm not exactly sure what the Sarge is, but I'm sure that's just another knockoff figure. Okay, I think we're going to go to the Peggy Ann's next and show you some of those things. These are what I call Peggy Ann doll clothes, and that's purely because they have a sticker on them that says Peggy Ann doll clothes on them. These are interesting in a sense that they've got really weird packaging. It's got kind of the same junk that you see in all of them, but there's a few items that I've never seen before except in these. I mean, I've seen these trumpets in a collection. You might come across one of these things, but now we know where it came from. They have two different styles of packaging, this Peggy Ann. And what's interesting is these all have Kmart stickers on them, so obviously they are available at Kmart. But that's this tray version, and Greg called it the TV tray version. It's just got this one's actually already open, and it's got this kind of, it's like almost like a plastic tray that you can go eat out of. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a sandwich in. It's pretty flimsy, but still, it's just kind of weird. And we have some of the happiest fighters. I mean, this guy's pretty smiley right here for going off to combat. So, kind of interesting artwork. I really do think that this packaging is really cool. This paper packaging, not the TV tray. It's got insignias of various divisions and all that kind of stuff on it, which is kind of neat. Nothing on the back. Again, these kind of have nothing on the back, but this kind of this tray. The most fascinating thing to me is, again, here is that clipboard that looks out really good. Canteen. I mean, you'll notice that this air vest doesn't have any markings on it. That paddle, they're almost identical to the G.I. Joe ones, but you can look at them close, you can tell. That blue helmet, I've seen that plenty of times, and it will say Hong Kong, and it will not say Hasbro in it. And then I think we've all seen this helmet a lot, this white helmet that has that star on it. You can kind of see that. But that's a pretty common knockoff thing. And those are the Peggy Anns, and we're going to switch over to Mr. Action next. Well, you talk about learning about stuff by looking at knockoffs. You learn on stuff every day. I always thought that these action soldier outfits were LGN and were basically the same as Mr. Action, which this is Mr. Action, and I have a couple of Mr. Action accessory cards, which I didn't bring because I thought I was bringing these, but these are Action Soldier, and they're actually by a different company. This is called Madison Ltd. versus this is LJN. Now, again, this accessory bag is extremely common. A lot of these parts and pieces we're going to talk about in the loose stuff, but this is just chock full of bits and pieces, and this thing retailed. I think all of these knockoff things that we're talking about retailed for under $1. But again, we can talk about these action soldier outfits. What's funny to me is they've got the same grunting soldier kind of looking guy there. They call it Action Soldier, but it's also Madison. Now, was this a reconglomeration of LJN? I don't know. Was this a former employee going off and buying the stuff? I don't know, but it's just interesting to me. They all have the same artwork. They have really kind of cool, more primitive artwork on the back of the card, but it's all identical. It's all the same. What's kind of funny, the bags don't even fit the whole way. They just kind of go halfway up, but they've got a great arrow. A lot of people have this this U.S. Navy raft in their kit. It's too small for G.I. Joe. It's another one of those unfulfilled bags. Here's that camouflage that we were talking about, that kind of knockoffy, almost Green Danger looking knockoff. And then here's a carbine with a scope. I regret to inform any of you, if you find a rifle with a scope that's a carbine or an M1, it is not G.I. Joe. The only guns that had scopes were the hunting rifles from G.I. Joe, as well as the Magnum Power rifle. We like to call this one the clown suit. I assume that's a motorcycle guy or a race car guy or something. Maybe he's a parachute dude. I don't know, but it looks goofy. And then here we got a dress Marine, which isn't exactly a dress Marine. And then we've got our sailor guy. But again, you kind of see that they cover the same basic basis as the other ones. And that's kind of fascinating. Now, the next group of stuff I'm going to do is a little bit, we're going to do Armed Forces. I got a handful of Armed Forces cards. We'll look at those, and then we'll do a hodgepodge of everything else. Okay, as if the stuff could get cheaper. And here we are at Armed Forces. And I mean, this stuff is even flimsier and cheaper made than some of the Action Buddy and obviously the the Totsy stuff. You know, that's one thing. I mean, you realize they're made to look good, but they're not necessarily made to perform good. And I mean, that's, I don't know. We can talk about that from a marketing standpoint. But anyway, you can kind of understand that they're just going off of the goodwill of G.I. Joe and trying to basically get some money off the thing. And again, as a kid, I always looked at I looked at these as a kid, that they were good accessories to add on, but the uniforms were just terrible. I mean, if I remember right, a lot of these uniforms don't even really fit a G.I. Joe very well, because they're just, you know, G.I. Joe's a little bit bigger, a little more puffier, and those blow molded guys just were blow molded. But even the quality of the thickness of the material, you can just see it's extremely thin. But they still keep the same gist. I mean, they have the air vest, which is almost a direct copy. We've got the clipboard, which is actually a little bit smaller than the vintage version. And then we've got some boots, and oh my word, they say Hong Kong on the side, just like we talked about in our boot video. I think this is just as cheesy as they can get. I assume this is some sort of Annapolis cadet, and they've got some really cheap gold braiding on it and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's always fun. You can always flip these things over and take a look on the other side, and you know, there's our cadet guy and our soldier, and you can see, and you'll notice that a lot of these pieces and parts are the same that are in other sets. Like that, there's that U.S. Navy, the hats, the cheapness, that kind of like overcoat, and I've even seen that thin camouflage poncho there on figures. And that radio, you've seen that probably radio a few times, but it's just kind of always fun. This is their version of the Tan MP. You can really tell that Billy Club is really thin and flimsy. Those helmets just aren't really worth much. They, you know, if you don't have any helmet, I remember as a kid, I didn't have any of the hard plastic helmets as a kid, and I thought those soft plastic helmets were the bomb, because Joe needed the helmet, man. There's your carbine. And again, we got some great stuff on the back of this. Okay, so the next grouping I'm going to show you is kind of a hodgepodge of the last of the stuff that I have, that I don't have multiple examples of, but just at least one. But these are all fun. Okay, this is just some kind of miscellaneous type stuff that we've got going on here. This one, I was foolish. I should have put this in with the Adventurer, because it's marked the Adventurer. You'll notice it's got kind of the same kind of stuff in there. Again, another one of these bags, very similar to the Mr. Action LJN one. Hand grenades, couple of rifles, couple of helmets, some scuba tanks, something kind of like that. And again, all cheap, knockoff, marked Hong Kong. Nothing will say Hasbro on it. A couple of sets that are actually pretty cool here, I think, are these Johnny Combat. And we were talking about these because they're actually very similar to the G.I. Joe large window boxes. And again, you know, Mama would have been, you know, hard pressed to like spend $1 on this versus $3 or $4 on a G.I. Joe set. So you can kind of understand. And they put a really cool shot of Iwo Jima's photograph, which was public domain, on the back of that, which I think is actually pretty cool. It's colorized and kind of neat. But interesting on this set, I mean, you've got this has to be early. And the reason why I say this has to be early, and I say 64, 65, is that the G.I. Joe stuff only had the side tabs in 64. So you know that this was copied right when this came off the thing, and we're going to grab this and just do the fastest we can. And then here's the Air Force dress, which is a direct copy of some of one of the Hasbro sets. And again, what I find interesting is this hat is a soft hat versus the Hasbro version, which turned out hard. Really interesting about this is there's metal insignia on these. I have found metal insignia on some of these knockoffs that is a dead ringer. I can't tell you it's any different than the Hasbro stuff. There actually is a tie. The tie is a different material than the G.I. Joe one. But what I find it very interesting is this is actually tagged made in Hong Kong. This is very similar to the uniforms that were put in the Buddy Charlie with the marks. Now we've got, this is a Fighting Yank Mego version. And again, I remember finding these into the mid-70s in 5 and dime stores and being extremely angry that the uniforms wouldn't fit or they would tear as you put them on the figure. But I always actually kind of enjoyed having the gun. So there's like, kind of looked at the way, well, I'll get a pair of boots and a gun out of the deal. Now, Bill Champ is interesting. Again, I think this is an interesting brand. Here's a small card. And here's the same unpuffy life vest with the signal flags, which are very similar to the GI Joe ones, but then also very similar to the buddy or the action buddy ones. And so you can tell that these figures were all hodgepodged. They were just taking names, and I think they were just putting packaging on it and just trying to do the best stuff. And looky here, Bill Champ by Totsi. So essentially that's the same as the Totsi toys, all that kind of stuff. This one right here, I think is the LJN knockoff, but it's actually GM toys, and this is Action Mike. But again, I love the artwork on this kind of stuff. It's a really cheap uniform, and that's a really cheaply looking M1 there. And then on the back, they've got artwork of various different sets they're selling. And again, the plastic doesn't even cover to the top. So similar to those action soldier outfits, but just these are now Action Mike. And it's got a trademark on it too, so you can't be using Action Mike out there. Anyway, you know, that kind of wraps us up, so I'll kick it back to the wide shot.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Ace. Again, like I said, this is a multi-part series, so this is pretty well encompassing a lot of the parts that you're seeing, but you're actually seeing them in the original packaging, which helps a lot and kind of shows you the diversity of what was out there, which is way more than I thought. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to tackle the parts in their loose format so that we can kind of help you identify what was a knockoff, what wasn't, and some of the differences. Some of the knockoffs are actually better than some of the originals.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, tune in next week. Thanks.
Thank you.